Another question, what is the real correlation between breast cancer and soy milk? I think you touched on this a little bit. She says she drinks a lot of it and has heard rumors that they're linked.
Yeah, so this was big for a while, that in rats, if you gave them soy, and if they had breast cancer, it caused it to spread more. And so then they told anybody who had breast cancer, you can't ever eat soy again in your life or some terrible thing will happen. And then they finally did a study in women, and in women it didn't have that effect at all. Soy is what we call a selective estrogen receptor modulator. And what that means is, we use this word plant estrogen, but that's really not right. What it really is that it depends on the organ it's in. Some organs it acts like estrogen, and some organs it blocks estrogen. Much like tamoxifen, which is a drug we use for breast cancer as well. And I like to think of it as being bisexual. Depends who it's hanging out with, whether it's going to act like estrogen or block estrogen. And so it's not just that if you eat soy you're getting high levels of estrogen. It really is more complex, and it does seem to act in breast cancer more like tamoxifen. So don't worry about the soy milk.
Great. And Lisa had a great question. She wants to know, what is needed to beat breast cancer? Do you think it's a matter of more funds, better science, novel approaches? If you had a wish list of needs to eradicate breast cancer, what would be on that list?
So I think she's right on. First of all, I think we need to refocus. We've been focused a lot on the cure, and it's interesting because we still have 40,000 women a year dying of breast cancer. So, we are doing better, but not far from perfect. And all the treatments have side effects. Surgery, chemo, radiation, hormones, targeted therapy, all have collateral damage. Whether it's swelling of the arm or radiation changes in the muscle or second cancers or leukemias or heart attacks, there's no free lunch in this. So it's not like you can get your treatment and you're back home free. And so it would be really better not to get it in the first place. And I think what we have to do is focus on finding the cause, because that's really the home run. We should understand how to treat and take care of the people who have it. And I'm particularly interested in making metastases, dormant, putting those cells back to sleep and leaving them asleep. But I really want to find the cause. And so one of the research we do here, we tend to do research that nobody else will do. Everybody else goes down one track, and I'm always going in the other direction. But there's a lot of emphasis on mapping out the DNA of every cancer cell. And to me, that's like looking at death row and, trying to figure out why somebody went into crime when they're really at the end of their criminal career. Instead, we need to go much earlier, and we need to focus on understanding the breast. We are the only animal other than non-spayed domesticated dogs that gets breast cancer. No other animal gets it. We're also the only animal that has breasts when we don't need them, when you think about it. All the other mammals, dogs and cats and all these, are flat-chested, and then when they get pregnant, breasts come out, they make milk, and they go back to flat again. And we're out there all the time. So there's something about the way our breasts are organized and the tissues and all that makes us more likely to get breast cancer. The breast is also the only organ that we're not born with, that comes later at puberty. So it's got a lot of stem cells ready to go, and I sort of think of them like those little sponge capsules, and you put them in water and they turn into a dog or a cat, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's how our breast is, and it's just sitting there with those little stem cells under the nipple, and then the hormones of puberty come and suddenly out there you are. And so and then they have to regenerate themselves for each kid. So there's a lot of things going on there that we really don't understand, that don't happen in exactly the same way in animals. And we really have to focus, I think, on the breast ducts, on the fluid, on what's going on in the breast if we're gonna find the answer.
And the test that you had just talked about,
Yeah.
home pregnancy test,
Right, would be great. It would be great. But one of the questions is the whole breast bad and sort of marching along towards cancer, or is it one duct? So you have 6 to 8 different ducts, and any of you who had a blocked milk duct know that then you get like a wedge of tissue that's hardened, and it can be different sizes, because when they draw pictures of the ducts, they always make it look like the breast is a pizza, with exactly the same size each duct in a radial fashion. Not true. There's some ducts that go straight back. There's some that are draped around. You can have one duct that's half your breast. But the anatomy is really not well outlined. And so that's another thing we're working on. Because surgeons just go in there and cut things out without having any idea what the anatomy is. And if we're really going to do things properly, we're working on some research where you could squirt the treatment right through the nipple into the duct. If you had some precancerous cells in the duct, then you could squirt this down like Drano and just clean it out and never do surgery.
Yeah.
It's silly to be cutting up
Right.
organs. If we understood the breast, we could deal with it much better.
Right.
And so I think that's where we have to put the emphasis.
Great. How does having a hysterectomy change your risks of getting breast cancer?
Good question. And the answer is it depends on whether your ovaries come in or out, because the uterus is irrelevant to breast cancer. The uterus doesn't make hormones, and it's there for babies, that part. But the ovaries do make hormones, and the breast is very sensitive to that. So as I mentioned earlier, having your ovaries removed reduces your risk not only of ovarian cancer but also breast cancer. Now, why don't we take everybody's ovaries out?
Right.
Well, because it also increases your risk of heart attack, stroke, and dementia. So, unless you're at very high risk and a gene carrier, you probably should keep your ovaries, because the risk of ovarian cancer is actually not that high. And overall, there's a higher risk of having your ovaries out than not.
Interesting. So we hear a lot about women who are having children later in life. It's happening a lot, at least all of my friends. So is there anything that women can do, and what is that true effect that you found so far as having kids? What age should you have your kids if you can, and what can you do if you have, if you've had kids at 40 or over 40?
Well, there's not really, some of this stuff is very interesting in figuring out breast cancer. And trying to think about how it works and why it works in any certain way. But it doesn't work for anybody's life, because you can't control everything. And so in the ideal world, the younger you are with your first pregnancy, the lower your risk. But I have a 23-year-old, and I'm not telling her to run out and get pregnant. And nor is she ready to do that. And I had her when I was 40, which shows you how much attention I pay to all of this stuff. So I think, I don't think you can live your life in terms of how am I going to minimize my risk of all these different diseases. But what you have to do is, if you have a choice, if you're sitting there saying, well, I had this history of cancer in my family, if I'm wondering whether I'll have my kids first and then sort of do my career, or do my career first, well, then you should have your kids first, because in overall scheme of things, if you have a choice, that's better. If you have your kids later, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It really doesn't. It just means you should do the regular surveillance that everybody should do. And so over 40, you do want to get a mammogram every now and again, and after 50 regularly. And the other thing that we didn't talk about yet, but if your breast tissue is really dense on mammogram, that's a sign that you're at higher risk as well. It's sort of like that's the neighborhood, represents the neighborhood. And so you do want, if you have a dense mammogram, then you might want to also have an ultrasound or have something else.
Yeah, great. That is definitely a question that's I've seen a couple of times.
Yeah.
So,
And when you
people
said
hearing
get a
about that.
mammogram after 40 every now and again, is it every year, or is that
I think it
after
depends.
50?
I think it depends on your risk. It depends on what your breasts look like on the mammogram. It depends on a lot of other factors, and that's why I was sort of not definitive about that. I am not one that believes you should have it every year after 40, because the risks really and the benefits are sort of even. But after 50, it's clear that every 1 to 2 years does make a big difference, and will reduce the risk of breast cancer death by 30%, which is really a lot. It's not 100%, but 30% is reasonable. So you should after 50, you should definitely be doing it. And meanwhile, we need to fight like hell to get something better for younger women.
Right.
One of the questions also that had come up was, when you started menstruating. Does that have anything to do with breast
Yeah,
cancer?
the younger you are with your first period and the older you are with menopause, so the more years you're exposed to reproductive hormones, levels of hormones, the higher your risk. And this sort of tells you, it was no big shock when we found out that taking hormones after menopause increased your risk. Because what is that doing? Just by calling them hormone replacement therapy, you're replacing something that isn't there anymore. Well, there's a reason it's not there anymore. We're programmed to have reproductive levels of hormones so that we can reproduce the race, and then when we get to a certain age, then that gets turned off and we have the second half of life without them, which I can tell you is much better and easier.
Okay.
It's much better.
Yeah.
And you won't even believe. I mean, you have that sort of period around where you get puberty where your hormones are all over the place. You have all these symptoms, and bitchiness, bloating, breasts are sore, and your moods are all over the place. Your brain doesn't work right. You're a little bit and then everything evens out. Go along, and then there you are again at perimenopause. Bitchiness, bloating, can't sleep at all. Brain doesn't work right. But just like puberty, it's transient. It's it's on average it's 2 to 3 years, the worst of it, and then everything comes back. I can testify. Your brain comes back. You can find your keys again. The hot flashes start going away, and actually, it's delightful not to get periods.
Something to look forward to.
It is.
I've always had the opposite.
Not so bad at
thoughts.
all.